I'm Matt.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Not Quite Religious, a podcast where a Christian pastor and former evangelical turned atheist have conversations about faith, religion, philosophy, and life while drinking coffee.
Welcome to the first episode of 2024.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Where we're going to talk about conservatism versus liberalism and a collectivism versus individualism sort of way. But first, the water.
Yeah, not having coffee this episode. We're in this mansion here in Amherst, and there's really fancy water. And I'm learning how the other side lives.
Yeah. I think what you said was, I didn't know water could be more delicious than water.
Right. I mean, I knew there's a difference between, like, tinny tap water and, like, natural spring water.
Yeah.
But this stuff that you gave me is not Poland Spring.
Yeah, it's crazy, though, right?
It's not Fiji water. You know
I like Fiji water.
Yeah, I do, too. But this is, like, another level. It's like, but you're like, it's H2O. It's hydrogen dioxide.
Yeah.
And how could it,
I mean, where it is, like, it shows that the rock beds and the minerals and sort of these, the parasites that are living in there and what has died actually make a difference.
Man, they just keep everything from us poor people. Got the good water.
Wait till you try the canned oxygen.
Like, what else in the world did I think was... What else in the world did I think was neutral that, like, really isn't? Like, do they have better grass outside? Like, when you lay in it, you just get instantly healed of all your... You just lay in this grass outside and you never get a cold again.
Cheese, charcuterie, and alcohol. Those are the things that rich people have that are, like, way better that you'd never know.
Yeah.
Like the difference between Johnny Walker and Johnny Walker Blue Label. Mm-hmm. So there's like Johnny Walker, and then there's the red label, black label, and blue label. And I think the black label is like $200 a bottle, and the blue label at this point is like $400 or $500 a bottle. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, oh,
yeah,
this is what it's supposed to taste like.
It's
more dramatic than your water difference.
Yeah, I can verify that. I went to a rich people party a couple of years ago, and the cheese was the best cheese I've ever had in my life. And like 2 days later, my wife had like some, Walmart deli cheese. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't Kraft.
You're like, what is this trash? And why is it in my house?
I threw it across. I threw it in her face. That's not true. I threw it in her face and was like, I can't eat this. What? I don't even know what this is. Yeah. This isn't even cheese.
This is not food.
She's like, this is literally like delicatessen, like smoked Gouda. Yeah. I was like, no, this is a yellow.
Why don't you put this in your Gouda and smoke it?
This is not. You can't go back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a problem. I'm a poor snob.
Yeah.
It's an issue. I can't afford. Mm-hmm. Good things.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I can afford good coffee. Not really, though. But I pay for it.
No, nothing from the civet yet, though.
Nothing from the civet. I heard there's ethical problems with that. Like the way they harvest it from the actual animal.
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
The better a food is, the cuter the animal and the worse it's treated.
Right.
Like duck, delicious. Mm-hmm. Bunny, yes, please. Veal, heck yeah. Suckling pig, foie gras. Like, none of these things are treated well.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I had a barista who roasts his own coffee and has his own business in Brattleboro. He's like, yeah, I'll never do civet. Just for ethical reasons.
Yeah.
So
people feel that way about foie gras.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, that's disappointing because I learned about it on my podcast. Nate was telling me all about it, and I was like...
I'm sure there's some ethical civet farms that just let civets be civets. And they go out and collect their poop at the end of the day.
Yeah. I was looking forward to having coffee that came out of a cat's ass.
It's not a cat. It's a civet.
It's a civet. out of a mammal's butt.
Yeah.
Alas, it probably isn't going to happen for multiple reasons.
Yeah. One is how expensive it is.
Mm-hmm. That is probably the main reason, not the ethics. If I could afford it, it'd be like, screw those civets. I'm sure already most of the chicken that I eat is not actually like free range.
Yeah. Does it say free range on the label?
I try to buy stuff that I'm sure I'm not 100%.
Yeah. Lots of food labels have jumped the shark for me as a chef. Like, Walmart is the largest seller of organic produce in the country. I'm kind of like, well, that seems meaningless.
Yeah.
Massachusetts has passed a law that all eggs have to be cage-free, so every egg carton now says cage-free. Mm-hmm. When you like look into what cage-free means, it's like there's a hole that the chicken could potentially figure out and go outside for 2 minutes. It's like solitary, how they still give the prisoner like 1 hour by themselves in the yard to walk around and see the blue sky, and then they're put back in the maximum. Like, that's essentially cage-free eggs.
When the egg was laid, the hen was not in a cage.
Right.
Therefore.
So yeah, your free-range chicken is probably meat. Like, what you should do is shop locally and with people that you know and like who.
That's the only way.
It's the best way you can do it.
You have to work harder and pay more.
It's true.
To live ethically.
I mean, one of our farms around here is like, we can't afford the organic label. And in fact, some organic practices are really harmful. So we just try to do like the best thing for our land and produce like the most nutritious food while we pay our farmhands a living wage. Right. And I'm like, that sounds good. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, tangent.
Yeah, let's not be a world power. Let's not be an imperial.
Oh, that ship has sailed.
Let's just go back to the dream, the city on the hill.
Mm. I don't want that either. The Puritans are pretty messed up. I'd be having scarlet letters all over me.
The agrarian society that we thought we could be. But I don't think you can do that. I don't think you could take a society like ours, 300 million people, dependent on so many imported things.
Yeah, you can't go
just
backwards.
Nah.
The way you go backwards is you fall.
Right. You just have to, as an individual, say, I'm going off the grid. And I don't need to take society with me.
Yeah, we got mini splits and solar panels. I don't know if that counts.
Yeah. Yeah, living ethically in this world, especially as an American, is really, 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 really hard.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the subject of this podcast, which I've been thinking a lot lately. I don't know if I'm too far back, actually. I've been thinking a lot lately about temperaments, like nature versus nurture. And I tend to think that there's more things that are nature than maybe the average person is comfortable with. And I know you're probably there because we talked about you and fatalism.
Yeah. Most of the studies I've read show like 80% or 90% of your traits are nature, and the nurture is like, you can tweak it slightly, but probably not as much as you think.
Yeah. So like,
I also don't believe in free will.
Right. I know you don't.
Yeah.
So you're probably people that are adults and lean left or democratic or liberal or progressive. Probably we're always going to. Mm-hmm. And vice versa with conservatives. So so that makes me think about temperaments and what it means, not like politically, but what it means psychologically to be a liberal or to be a conservative or to lean left or to lean right or to be a traditionalist or to be, a leftist or whatever. And I think, like, by and large, the collectivism versus individualism paradigm is a fine way, although probably overgeneralized, to talk about the dichotomy. I think that people that lean left tend to really understand themselves as a small part of something big, as a part of the collective, and that their actions affect the whole. Like we were just talking about with food ethics.
Yeah.
Like what you buy, and leftists tend to be really conscious of this, and especially those who go full, social justice stuff. It's like they empathize with, and maybe some of it's personal. Maybe they were outcasts in high school, or losers, so to speak, or not one of the cool kids, or whatever. Or maybe they're an actual political minority themselves. There's just a natural empathy towards those who they see the world doesn't work for. And so this natural empathy, they're just, that social consciousness is built into the temperament, the psychology is what I'm saying. And so they view traditionalism as a problem, and therefore are considered left. And then on the other side, I think that, and I was talking to you beforehand, it's like trying to find a way to put this generously and fairly. So I think conservatives tend to, if the left is afraid of more suffering, the right may be afraid of suffering, but I think they associate suffering with disorder, whereas the left may associate suffering always with the current order. The current order is what's causing the suffering, so the current order needs to change. That's the mind of somebody on the left. Whereas the mind of somebody on the right is, if these over-emotional leftists would have just left it alone, it would have worked itself out. What we need is order. Order is the remedy to all suffering. It's not perfect, but eventually, I think the conservative thinks eventually, if everybody tacitly or explicitly agrees to this is the way it is, we'll eventually figure it out. But you keep bringing in these fast social reforms, and you just keep messing everything up. The very suffering that you're combating, the conservative thinks, is the suffering that you yourself are causing. We have to keep going back to order because you keep disrupting the order.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So we're trying to restore order so that there's less suffering. And so the goal may be the same, and it's rather simple. Nobody wants to suffer. But I think also the conservative seems to not be as, they seem to understand their place in this world as, I don't want to say narcissistic because I'm trying to be fair, but like they don't see themselves much as part of a whole, I think, as somebody who tends to lean towards left.
Well, I think the conservatives they'd say, sort of jumping off that, they believe that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, and if you're not doing that, it's a moral failure.
Yeah, but I think
on your part.
Yeah, that comes from the sense that, like, in the end, it's just you and God. I think in the conservative mind.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end.
Right.
It's, you talk to a conservative about God judging a society. It almost doesn't make sense, even though it does. Mm-hmm. Like, conceptually, it can make sense. Because it's actually in the Bible. In the Old Testament, God's always sending prophets, not to individuals, but to the people of Israel.
Yeah.
It's a collective problem. But I think in the conservative mind, it's me and God. And that's what matters. Whether I can stand before God at the end of my life and say I did it right. And like, even if my society was evil and I was complicit in its evils, I don't even think that's
I don't even think they'd say that's
not their mindset.
They're like, I did my thing, I was a good person.
Yeah, and that's all I could do.
Right.
I took care of my kids.
I can't make Joe down the road be a good...
Right.
And the liberals like, no, we can like collectively bring about change.
Which appears to the conservative as like coercive.
Yeah.
Like you have to change my individuality to fit your ethics in order to make Joe down the street a better person. You're coercing me and Joe for your ideology.
Yeah.
I think that's...
I wouldn't even say I'm trying to converse Joe to be a better person. I'm trying to coerce Joe so that he can't trample on other people's rights in the name of keeping the order. And so one of my Instagram reels yesterday was actually extremely timely to this conversation. It was an ex-evangelical Baptist pastor, and by that I think he still might be a Christian. I just mean he's no longer a pastor.
Yeah.
Who is one of the more outspoken white anti-racist movement leaders. So like what the right wing would call ultra woke. And in this reel, he's giving a talk. And he said, in 1963, and we have actual data because Gallup did a poll. In 1963, did black people have the same access to good education as white people? Right? They polled people. This is before the Voting Rights Act. This is before the Civil Rights Act. Right? This is before forced segregation. This is the same year that, those famous pictures of the fire hoses being used.
Yeah.
Right? That's 1963. Do black people and white people have the same access to good education? 2/3 of Americans said yes. Mm-hmm. We know that answer is no. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. But the conservatives would say, well, don't touch it. It's fine. And if you didn't have the progressive pushing, what you would have is segregation and not equal school. Not that it's equal now, right? By no means am I saying that people in inner city Brooklyn have the same education as my kids do in Amherst, Massachusetts. Right? Not close.
Yeah.
But it's actually better.
Yeah.
And in 1963, the answer to that, it's very clearly no, that they don't have the same education. But 2/3 of Americans said they do. Now, to bring that today, I think if you were to poll white Americans and say, do black people have the same access to education today as white people? At least 2/3 would say yes. And the answer is still no. Right? It's better. And they would say, well, it's better. Right? Look, you had the Voting Rights Act. Look, you had segregation stop. Look, so we did all the things because you progressives pushed us. And now it's better. So let's just stop. Right? And I think the progressives like, yeah, it's better, but it's not the best. So let's keep going.
Yeah. And if you truly believe, though, imagine that you truly believe as one of those 2/3 that they do.
Oh, I think they truly believe
right.
Yeah.
You'd have to be convinced that you'd have to be persuaded that you're wrong about that.
Right.
In order to be motivated to progress. And if you're not persuaded, then you're just going to think it's ideology that's pushing.
Yeah.
You're not going to think it's genuine compassion. And it's going to appear coercive and trampling on your individual rights. It's going to appear like you're being lectured by people who think that they're more moral and more ethical and better people than you are, and you're not going to like that. Nobody likes that.
Right.
And so then the question becomes, if you're liberal, okay, how do I persuade my conservative friend that that they're viewing this myopically, essentially, right? Because if you genuinely believe that that black Americans have the same access as white Americans to education, if you genuinely believe that, somebody's either the left really is being controlled by an ideology that's not true, or you have this insanely myopic view of things that happens to be convenient for what you may or may not realize as your psychological need. In other words, if it did dawn on you all of a sudden that it was true that black people don't have equal education. Your sense of self dissolves in a sense.
Yeah, or, even conversely, people who... Because 1/3 of Americans said, no, it's not equal. Mm-hmm. I think we're probably inferring that most of those people were liberal.
Or black.
Well, these were white people.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But there could even be some conservatives who are like, no, it's not equal. But the way to go about change isn't what the left wants or what the left is doing. Which I think we saw in sort of Black Lives Matter and Native American, well, this isn't the way to do it. You don't protest on bridges and stop traffic. Like, what are you doing? That's not how you bring change about. And, at least with Black Lives Matter, no, this is we're going to inconvenience you because it seems like that's how we get your attention.
I see that as more of a centrist view. I don't know if I'm off on that or not. And that just might be subjective and relative. But that sort of attitude of because you see it even on people that vote Democrat that consider themselves liberal. They're like, yeah, we need change, but we can't do it. We have to do it incrementally.
Yeah, see, I think that's conservatives. I would say those Democrats are not left.
Yeah.
They don't know it. But
yeah, that's what I was wondering how you would understand that. I think most people think if you vote Democrat, that means you're liberal. But I think the true left would say that's just virtue signaling. Mm-hmm. That's actual virtue signaling, not the way that conservatives use it now. Anytime anybody mentions any virtue, they're like, that's virtue signaling. Yeah. But I mean true virtue signaling, when that term was being used by the left, 10 to 12 years ago, was meant for those sort of centrists that just in their public speech would speak against or for, these progressive things. Yeah. But then when it came to actually implementing them, they had a very
whoa.
They're like, let's do this through the proper channels. Yeah. Nobody needs to be stopping traffic. Yeah.
Don't inconvenience us.
Right. And then you realize, throughout the history of the world, that any kind of societal change happened because there were extremists who were like, I don't see how we're going to change this unless...
Burn it to the ground.
Unless we burn it, unless I stand at the front of the bus, unless I give really offensive speeches in front of everyone, unless we stand on bridges,
The Birmingham bus boycotts were even derided by white liberals as you're going to ruin our economy. Yeah. And the black people were like, cool, let's do that then. Because it's better, because we're already second-class citizens, so it can't get worse than it is. Right.
So, but I guess what I'm advocating for this particular episode is not a particular political stance, because our podcast isn't political.
Yeah, but about personalities, which is...
But why somebody would... I think the reason people lean the way that they do is based partially on their temperaments and then partially on their experiences.
Yeah.
If your temperament is order, and I also happen to be in majority culture, I'm straight, I'm white.
Yeah, and you don't want change.
You don't even know. You don't even have a clue of what it means to be, a black person in antebellum South in the 50s or whatever. Or even today, you don't know what it's... the same fear doesn't rush through your body when you get pulled over by a cop.
Yeah. Well, even to make it less political, I think, like you said, temperament, but also circumstance. There's a reason that the vast majority of ultra-liberals are young. Right? It doesn't cost you as much.
Right.
All of a sudden you have a partner and kids and a home and bills to pay. It's a lot harder to go take off work and sit on a bridge to protest something and potentially go to jail. Right? And now you maybe have a felony in your company, you're in a will to work state, and so they don't have to give you a reason to fire you at all. Right? Yeah. So now you've put your food, all of a sudden it becomes there's a lot more motivation to just do things and not think about ideology or put yourself out there or push for change, because you got stuff. And what you're going to do is you're going to raise your kids and you're going to raise them with good values and make them be good, help them be good people, but that's all you can do.
And then they get into their early 20s and they're like,
burn it.
they're like, burn it, and you guys are cowards.
Yeah.
And
why aren't you on TikTok?
Or no, why aren't you like? You become what you thought you'd never become.
Yeah.
You become parents. You become your parents.
Yeah.
And the cycle goes on. And I think I wish I could remember the joke in this setup. There's a comedian, Shane Gillis, who has this idea about early onset republicanism. And how you can tell, like, how it's it's pulling you. And you bring up a really interesting point, because I think concerns about, again, back to concerns about feeding your family, not being in jail on Christmas because you protested something. Right. That stuff is really real. And then all of a sudden you're like, maybe I should just, maybe I should. You have a motivation to be conservative at that point.
Yeah.
You have a motivation to justify that.
Well, and here's the thing. I think you just have a motivation to not be as liberal. Like, you don't even... But you wouldn't say you're conservative.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But conservative, lowercase c conservative, right, as a political ideology is like, just let it be. Don't stir the waters. Don't cause any trouble.
Yeah.
Right? Don't put... So you're still liberal. You're still going to vote for Barack. You're still going to, give your money to, I don't know, whatever, Tapestry Health, or, you're still going to say that you're pro-choice. You're still going to say that you're, against American imperialism. But your day-to-day life looks very, very different.
Or in a grand twist of irony, you're going to make yourself feel morally superior for not being extreme.
Yeah.
You're going to end up going, the problem with the extreme left is that they don't care about freedom of speech. And I do. I care about what I want to give the other side a platform, and they want to shut down the other side.
Yeah.
And this kind of talk and you hear this a lot from centrists, and sounds way more critical than I intend to be. But you hear a lot from centrists, just always this sort of both-sidism. Both sides are wrong. And the reason both sides are wrong is because they're too extreme. It's too polarized. It's unreasonable. It's irrational.
Yeah. Right. Or they're going too far, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we already won the same-sex marriage debate. Like, let's just... Why do gay people need to be more vocal? Or why do trans people... Like, you just...
Yeah. I think it comes off like that, but for me it also comes off like it sort of comes like I'm in the morally superior position because I'm more rational and reasonable. Because I can have empathy for both sides. Because I can converse and have dialogue with both sides. And you on the extremes and fringes, you can't. So you can't actually love everyone. I can. Because I'm in the middle. Which is actually how I think a lot of people view me. As someone who gets along well and can dialogue with anybody. But it's not, which is true. I think it's just because of my natural, the way I am.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to persuade everybody not to be so extreme.
So we're coming up on time, unfortunately.
Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, I don't think you're trying to persuade anyone to be less extreme.
Yeah.
I think you just have a temperament where you can sit down with extreme people.
Yeah, and what I'm actually trying to persuade people is to understand the other side fairly.
Yeah.
That's different, I think. Maybe some people say that's semantics. But I think
I don't think it is. Because saying you can dialogue with both sides and actually sitting down and giving a fair hearing and still maintaining your. I think it's different.
I feel like if you're an extreme leftist or an extreme Trumper, and you can't articulate the other, like in a fair and empathetic way, then
when all you can do is create caricatures and straw men,
then
instead of saying like I actually can see some of their points and understand where they're coming from and why they're valuable to that person, right? So,
and I still think it's horrible,
and I still think it's wrong. Yeah. Right. But if you can't understand, like if you're just Hannity screaming about, how trans people shouldn't use the bathroom of the gender they identify with, or if on the flip side you're a trans person who's screaming about how, homophobic someone like Hannity is, not to say he's not, but like there is conservative, capital C conservatives have an actual fear of trans people molesting their kids.
Right.
It's unfounded statistically, but you have to meet them there and not just say
human. Yeah. And you could. It's almost as if you could empathize with somebody's delusion.
Yeah, someone.
If you remember,
you empathize that they're afraid. They're afraid of the other and the unknown, and you have to meet them there and say, okay, like how can we make this? Like, let's start with you're afraid.
Right.
Right.
I'm afraid of stuff too.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I just probably got us all in trouble.
Really?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Anyway.
So, radio silence.
Yeah, there was a noise. I'm like, is that a ghost?
No, I think I just twisted the cap.
Oh, okay. Anyway, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's a good first episode. Coming right out of the gate.
I guess so. Anything else?
No.
All right. Have a great week.